So we talked a little bit about adding. I have some more manipulatives here for me to use. I have physical blocks of these too, if we want. I'll try and incorporate them more in future videos. Base 5, we talked to adding. It's about that idea of regrouping. It's easier to see like, oh, I have too many blocks here and I need to move on, than it is to kind of visualize when it's time to take something away. The principle remains the same from what we've seen when we are subtracting, let's say 23 minus 9. That's a terrible color. When the top number is too big for the 9 to come off from conveniently, I need to borrow from the section before it. And then I kind of mythically make up these 13 units that I can now take 9 units away from. This would be in base 10, by the way. That same principle is being held true. It's just when it's time to borrow and what we get when we borrow starts to look a little different, because in this instance, when I borrowed the 2, I ended up with 10 units that I would then shift over and say like, oh, I totally see how I have 4 after I take my 13 and I take 9 away. But when you break a strip that's base 5, you don't get 10. So that's where the pieces come into play. I hope it helps. We'll do both. We'll do some visual pieces work, and then we'll try some of this just formulaic, like what is the algorithm going to be, and how does it look the same, and how does it look different? Okay, so I got 2 numbers here. I got 211 base 5 minus 102 base 5, 102 base 5. I tried to kind of do a visualization here, so I hope that you can recognize at this point. Yeah, that's 211. I got my 2 mats. I got my 1 strip. I got my 1 unit. And then down below, same thing. I've got 1 mat. I don't have any strips because that's what the 0 is telling me. And then I've got 1, 2 units. Okay, so we're going to walk through the steps of showing like what happens when we borrow and when we need to. And for convenience, I'm actually going to do this a little out of order because I'm going to start here on the left-hand side and just show that, like, hey, if I'm subtracting this away, these 2 guys are going to cancel each other out, right? Boom, gone, gone. So I would have 1 mat left over. Voila. There is my leftover mat. So that's kind of my answer. And that allows us to kind of focus on what's happening with these units and strips. So as you can see, I'm in the predicament that I set up in the last one, which is I'm trying to take 2 units away, but I only got 1 to give. And so I'm going to take that strip, I'm going to borrow from the place value in front of it, and I'm going to take that strip and I'm going to break it into its unit pieces. Even though I end up with 6 unit pieces, which doesn't work in base 5, just like we kind of note, hey, I had 13 units in the last one, even though that doesn't work in base 10. I can visualize and see like, oh, that temporarily gives me enough units so that my subtraction problem works and functions and all those other good things. So let's break that strip up. All right, poof. Now the strip is all of these different units being mooshed together. I'm going to kind of shift the units over so that they kind of line up with what I'm subtracting away from. And again, I can say, all right, each one of these cancels them out so that I can see in my answer key, I would have the 4 remaining units would kind of carry down to my answer section down at the bottom. There we go. Then it's just kind of a matter of working backwards. I'm going to kind of extend this line just to show that this is my answer of like saying, all right, I got units. I have 1 remaining mat. I have no strips. Even though I started with a strip up here, I had to break it, right? So I don't have any strips, and then I have the 4 units that are left over. Now, it can be tempting. We're going to resist that temptation to say like, oh, 211 base 5, like I know that that's 56, right? Because it's 50 and then 5 more and then 1. And I know that 102, well, that's going to be, oops, 27. I can do 56 minus 27. Oh, I get that that's 39. Again, my math is failing me. 29. And then I can see, oh, look, there's my 25, and there's 4 more, make 29. We're going to try and take out that compulsion to rely on base 10 and just really think about what happens when we subtract these blocks. We'll try the next one using a little less block work and a little more standard algorithm in the base 5 format. But I am going to ask that I understand that you know what 56 minus 27 is, even if it takes me to figure it out, a minute to figure it out. We don't want to rely on that, or it kind of defeats the whole purpose. All right, so here's my setup. I'm looking at 1, 2, 3 base 5 minus 4, 1 base 5. So I start with a mat, 2 strips, and a unit, 3 units, and I'm supposed to take away 3 strips. So here from the get-go, I'm going to try and show what this is going to look like using just kind of the standard algorithm strategy, but in base 5, and then we'll see if the pieces kind of mirror that as I go. So if I had 3 pieces and I take 1 away, these sort of cancel each other out, and I end up with 2. Well, 3 minus 1, that does in fact leave me with 2. That seems to jive. That seems to make sense. The problem is here, obviously, right? I have 2 strips, and I'm trying to take away, if we think of these as minuses, I'm trying to take away 4 strips. I can't take away 4 strips from 2 strips. I need more strips. That's where this guy comes in. So we want to think of this mat as a collection of 5 strips. So I would write that as, I would say I'm getting rid of the mat. But the thing is, it's not 12, right? That's what we're used to doing, is saying like, oh, I borrowed from here, and now I have 10, 12 of these, because I'm only bringing over 5. So when I borrow, I need to keep track of that idea of this is no longer 2, it is now 7. All right, so I've now broken my mat, and I can see the 7, 4, 5, 6, 7 that I was reflected in here. And then I can also see how when I got too many colors going on, sorry. I can also see how I'm going to take away 1 of each of these guys. My minuses are taking away 1 of these, leaving me with 3 strips, which again I see reflected here on the left. When I borrowed, I ended up with 7 strips. 7 minus 4, which works, is now 3. Again, we're cheating a little bit because we're using a number like 7, even though 7 doesn't exist in base 5. But we do the same thing. When we make 13 ones, that does not how ones work. That's not how they group. But in my head, I have to be able to kind of juggle that and make that happen. This would be a 5 here. All right, and then in our final step, I'm going to remove the blocks entirely and just kind of talk through what might happen as I look at this just mathematically. I mean, it's all math, but just using numbers, numerically, let me say that. Okay, so 4, 1, 2 base 5 minus 2, 3, 1 base 5. I got 2 units up top. I'm taking away 1 of them. I can do that, right? Leaves me with 1. Excellent. Next, I have 1 strip, and I'm supposed to take away 3. Can't do that. So I'm going to cross this off and rewrite. Instead of 4, it's now 3. I don't need all 4 of them. I just need to take 1 of the mats. And it's not going to be 11. No, no, no. I'm going to say I'm breaking that into 5. I had 1 before. So you're going to get in the habit of replacing not just the thing you're borrowing from, but the thing that you can't just drop a 1 next to it and have it make sense. You got to replace both of them when you borrow now. Now I had 6 strips. I'm taking 3 away. I should end up with 3 strips. I only have 3 mats left, but that's still enough to cover the 2 mats that I'm taking away, leaving me with 1 mat remaining. I can check this by adding and seeing how, like, oh, this would make 2. This would make 6, which is too many. That would leave me with 1 extra. And then I would carry 1 over. That's 4. What do you know? That's exactly what I started with. So my answer is 1, 3, 1 base 5. I can check it using the addition strategies that we discussed last time, should we so desire. But again, we're steering clear of, in my answers, using numbers that are 5 or more, using digits, excuse me, that are 5 or more. But I did have to kind of bend time and space. I had to cheat base 5 just a moment and create a replication of how many strips I had, even though that number does not make sense in this number system. Last one. 3, 3, 3 base 5 minus 1, 2, 4 base 5. Right from the get-go, I have an issue in that I'm trying to take 4 away from 3, and I can't do that. So I'm going to borrow here. Again, I don't have 13 ones. I'm adding 5 to it, so instead of 3, I now have 8. 8 minus 4 should give me 4 ones. 2 minus 2 strips means I have no strips left over, and then my mats seem to cover. I have 3 mats. I need to take 1 away. That leaves me with 204. Again, if I'm really concerned, I can check it using base 10. I can convert everything to base 10 and be like, is this still fundamentally true? But I would reserve that only for checks and verification if I'm really confused. And I wouldn't, again, it defeats the purpose if I use that as my primary goal. Hopefully, once we start to get to the style and the flow, that idea of adding 5 when you borrow is really the big piece. You're not adding 10 when you move from place values, you're adding 5. Because it's base 5. All right, rock on.